All right, here's what I'm going to do with my speech today. That's due tomorrow at 11:59. I am going to be describing the type of person that Drew Brees is. He was one of the finest and most bravest players in the NFL that I have ever known. Now, the type of man that he was the greatest caring of all time. He had the best type of patience that any fan of the New Orleans Saints would ever expect from each of their players when they didn't get what they want sometimes. He was a very warm-hearted, he still is, a very warm-hearted person who cares for each and every one of his loved ones, his best pals, and his former teammates that are now in the retired division with him. But sometimes, when he was just a fancy little child, he sometimes got picked on and bullied, all because of his birthmark underneath his right eye. Oftentimes, what most children did to make him angry was give him random nicknames because of that, by calling him Spot and wipe that whatever's off your face. But all he did was try his best to convince them that once you have a birthmark, you can't remove it. It's hard to remove those kinds of things. Now, before he was drafted into the National Football League in the year of 2001, he spent his high school years with, what was the name of that team? I think it may have been the Dallas County Mavericks, since he was born in Austin, Texas, on January 15th, 1979. But a big struggle he had in high school was he tore his ACL in the middle of a high school football game with the Mavericks. But he overcame that very quickly. After he graduated high school, he went to one of the most ginormous college universities in the entire United States. The name of that college he attended was Purdue University, in which their team is named the Boilermakers. Now, how should I describe his time with the Boilermakers? He spent the best 4 years there with the Purdue. He won a couple championships with them. The biggest one he won was the Alamo Bowl, which was in the year of 2000, a year before he went into the draft for the NFL. In one of his best writing books named Coming Back Stronger, which is about his time with the Saints before and after they won the Super Bowl, there were a few pictures of him carrying a red rose in his teeth, which was he was the most honored young quarterback that Purdue University ever had in their last 25 years of their franchise history. He never hesitated one time in his life. He never gave up despite whatever challenges he faced that was extremely difficult. But for 5 years, for his 5 years in the NFL, first 5, he spent most of those 2 years, 5 years with the Chargers, but for the first 2 years, he wasn't allowed to be the starting position. He was often considered the backup quarterback. I forgot what the name of their quarterback was who wore number 7. That was the starter before him. But Sometimes he would often get depressed because one of San Diego's former coaches always told him to sit down for no reason when he was just asking a very simple question that out of curiosity about when would he have the starting position. But then tragedy nearly ended his career on December 31st, 2005. He was the starting quarterback of the Chargers. It was near the end of the regular season that year. After he fumbled the ball, he jumped on top of it, but one of the Denver Broncos' linebackers pulled his arm out too far, and instead, he dislocated his right shoulder out of normal position. They took him back to the sidewalk immediately so the training doctors could take a look at him, and they said he punctured a nerve in the right side of his right shoulder, meaning he can still feel the tendons, he just can't feel his blood flowing through his shoulder immediately. But but then about the day after, he went to the doctor immediately, realizing he needs to have surgery to repair his arm. And so when he went to the emergency room at one of the nearby hospitals in San Diego, he met with Dr. Steve Andrews. And the first thing that Dr. Andrews told him was, "Drew, you have dislocated your shoulder." And then shockingness just blew his mind with fear that he wouldn't be able to play football again. He he fearfully asked him, "Doctor, does this mean I can't be able to throw as fast as I normally do with a football anymore?" And then a few moments later, Dr. Andrews was thinking about how to explain this to him. His doctor said to him, "I don't know how long it's going to take for your shoulder to be repaired. Usually with dislocations, it takes 2 months to fully recover from. But what happened is, as your shoulder popped out of normal position, you have it torn between the socket on the middle of your arm and the rotator cuff, which is the top joint of your shoulder, where you're able to lift things and throw things over your head." So he had to go through I think about 5 different surgeries. Well, more likely 2. So after they put his shoulder in normal position again, about 5 days later, they had to elevate it for him so he could be able to feel the tendons and the nerves in his shoulder flowing at the same time. So during those 2 months of his recovery, he courageously thought to himself, "If I want to be as accurate again, I have to start throwing slowly until my arm is better." So they did a little scientific test with him for those 2 months. And then later on, he fully recovered. But as he was getting ready for the upcoming draft season, his 2 options were to be joining either the Miami Dolphins or the New Orleans Saints. Hang on a second. Of all his childhood, he was the most patient out of all of them, out of all his siblings. He had a little brother named Reed, who was around the same type of nice kid that he was. He had a few sisters in his childhood. I mean, they all respected him well. The biggest struggle he had to overcome as a teenager was having to deal with the fact that his parents divorced when he was about 13 or 17 years old. But through his teenage years, he just immediately decided when he was 15 years old, he would show his high school what a tough and heroically monstrous player that he was for their team. But anyway, back to the shoulder part of what happened leading to his draft with the Saints. He had a lot of fear that his dream was getting torn away from him. He was more nervously thinking to himself, if I'm not good for San Diego, who am I going to have to be with? So he almost signed with the Dolphins. But when he surprisingly heard the news that New Orleans was in recovery due to the fact that Hurricane Katrina sabotaged mostly every part of the city on August 29th, 2005, right before the regular season started, he heard how many houses needed to be reconstructed due to the hard winds tearing the roofs halfway open. And so he met with the Saints' new coach, Sean Payton. And he was wondering to himself, should I be able to trust this guy? How can I get him to motivate me? And how can all these new teammates we currently have support me as their head brother? Well, it just so happened that when he became so devastated to find out how many lives were lost and how many survived during the storm, he decided to help rebuild the New Orleans community, not just for the Saints, but every other businesses, including all emergency responders and military personnel who came to help give shelter to all the citizens of New Orleans through the Superdome, which was the only shelter they could ever think of to use. So he played 15 years with the New Orleans Saints. But overall, despite winning one Super Bowl, going to the playoffs about three to five times, and missing it 6 times, overall, he was the most magnificent quarterback that they could ever have in their 57-year history. I hope this explains a lot to you and all my fellow classmates of public speaking. And Professor Alexander, I hope you see this immediately and give me any comment you think of how I did. I look forward to hearing that. Thank you very much, sir.